Hi, everyone. Very good evening, good afternoon. I'm sure you've learned Data Cloud on a certain extent for sure. And today our topic and our session would be Salesforce Data Cloud development scope. And so far, you understand what is Data Cloud and what does Data Cloud do and what are all the connectors, and then how the segmentations, how we calculated insights, what is the best practices for an implementation. And then we've talked about the licensing strategy as well. So today is our last session on Data Cloud series, and this is our 16th session. So you could find all the past recording sessions at our YouTube of Salesforce Singapore Marketers. And yeah, let's start. So about myself Anindra, and I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I'm an enterprise architect working with the Salesforce and AWS for many of the years. I'm a technology evangelist. I'm managing a couple of group leading activities in Singapore, which is Marketers and Slack. And I'm a Salesforce marketing champion, which have so and so kind of a number of certifications, but don't worry about it. It's just a matter of learning, which all you've done for the last couple of months. And I'm a MarTech architect, and I have a blog, which I'm going to write blogs about Salesforce related topics and out of the Salesforce as well. And you could follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. So today our agenda would be, we'd love to talk about and discuss all the touch points across the Data Cloud from a development perspective. The agenda would be Data Cloud, API libraries and SDKs. So everyone should aware and understand about what are all the libraries available from an API standpoint, and what are all the SDKs available within the Data Cloud, where developers are really, hands-on. There are full stack developers available in the market, and there are other Salesforce developers, AWS developers, DevOps teams, SysOps teams. So this is especially for them. You should understand what are all the libraries available, what are all the SDKs available from a Data Cloud perspective. And after that, when it comes to a technology evangelist like us, so we should always focus on connecting systems together. So it's always focus how we can connect Data Cloud methods, which is provided by Connect API. We can talk about more in detail in our next slides. And the next thing is web interactions for Data Cloud, how we can integrate the websites, and then how we could inject the interactions through websites. Like there are some interactions like cart items or purchase orders, or anyone who's browsing the website. You could bring all the interactions to Data Cloud using one of the web interactions SDK. And we have mobile app integration for a Data Cloud. So we have other integration SDK, especially for mobile apps, where we could inject the SDK to the mobile apps, and then we could get all the interactions of a mobile events as well to Data Cloud. And the most important, the favorite one, which from a Salesforce developers related, of accessing via Apex. So Data Cloud objects can be accessed via an Apex. We could talk about what are all the objects are available to access via an Apex and how to access that. And then there are some APIs which we can leverage and we can query using calculated insights. So some third-party vendors are really looking forward to build some industry-wise verticals on those calculated insights for commerce, for sales, service, and other loyalty and other aspects. So we could talk about how we can query those calculated insights, and we can show some resources which are readily available in Data Cloud for a development area. And if any questions and answers, I would happily help you out. And you could put all the questions in chat. So whenever I have a time, I'm happy to go through it and then answer those questions. So let's jump into the topic. As most of you are aware of it, from Feb 14th, 2023, that's the day when we started Data Cloud series. Now it's calling as, initially we have customer data platform. Now it's calling as Salesforce Data Cloud. As you're all aware of it, during the transition, you may see there are some differences called customer data platform, called Genie, called customer data cloud, customer 360 audiences, and Salesforce CDP. So now Salesforce is in a complete transitioning mode, and they're going to quickly change the names. Wherever we have old names, they're going to turn to Data Cloud, and don't worry about it. So it's all the same platform. It is just a matter of dividing the structures into different entities which can serve for different personas, like analytics, like data people, data aware specialist, data warehouse teams, and all the areas. So if anyone interested, you can see there are 2 links which I'm going to share this presentation as well. So there's one called Data Cloud Developer Documentation, and there's one more called Data Cloud Documentation. So this is completely for developers, and the other documentation is for implementation team. You can go through for entire implementation, how you can implement the Data Cloud, and how a developer can start implementing Data Cloud, leveraging Data Cloud features on the development side to integrate and connect multiple systems. All right, so let's move into number 1 topic: Data Cloud API libraries and SDKs. I know, most of the developers or most of the technology evangelists have been, curious to working on what are all the APIs available for Data Cloud to come to connect. What are all the APIs available to, extract or retrieve the data from Data Cloud and then leverage in my system? What are all SDKs available to inject the data into Data Cloud? So here is a complete picture of libraries and SDKs. So there are some sort of APIs available in Data Cloud, one with Ingestion API. We can talk about more with the Ingestion API. Ingestion, nothing but like, you can just ingest the data into Data Cloud in different ways. We can talk about more in the next slides. The other APIs are Connect API, which is very, very important and most famous API in the recent times, which is Connect API. You should aware more on the Connect API in the later point of time. And there are other APIs called Metadata API, Calculated Insights API, Query API, and Profile API. We will talk definitely going in the next slide. So these are all some of the APIs where it supports in Data Cloud currently. And when it comes to SDKs, there are 2 SDKs supported currently. One with Web Interactions SDK, which we're calling as a Salesforce Interactions SDK. The other one is Engagement Mobile Software Development Kit, which is EMSD, which is nothing but SDK. This is one of the SDK where especially leveraging for mobile app integrations. And we can talk more in our coming slides as well. So let's talk about Ingestion API. So I know, you're all working together with multiple times called Streaming API, because when you're trying to, design any other streaming kind of an events, or if you can look at the change data capture, the change data capture, which is one of the, fundamental principles of a RESTful API, which works on Streaming API again. So there are 2 API patterns which is supported for Ingestion API, a pure plug RESTful API with 2 different patterns. Ingestion API is one with streaming, the other one with batch. Streaming, it's always like real time. We can talk about how streaming works and how batch works. When it comes to streaming API, if you look at high volume of data or the number of high volume of records which is flowing or which you want us to flow into a designated system or a platform, a kind of a fire and forgot kind of a streaming pattern. So what it does is it will fire the event and then forgot the event. It is just a pure pull the data and then push the data into a designated platform. So it is like suitable for a small micro batches of data, especially when you're working with a kind of a platforms which can definitely evolve on a day-to-day basis for your needs. So this API, which is really fantastic for developing and leveraging those for a small micro batches of a data. So if you look at some of the source systems have been built on modern streaming architectures and are capable of change data capture, the one which I've said, CDC, the change data capture. And also it's suited for consuming data from webhooks as well. So if you're going to build any webhooks in different third-party systems where we have a capability to leverage this Ingestion API to connect with webhooks and then bring the data into your Data Cloud as well. So this API is especially for streaming data from an external sources or external third-party systems, because the payloads of what you're going to build, which is going to be a messaging property kind of format, which are going to be queued and ingesting into your Data Cloud hourly. So that's what this streaming API can leverage for. And there is one other, especially on batch API. So this batch API, especially working with a large amount of data. When you work with the REST versus bulk APIs, you have a REST API versus bulk API, right? The same kind of approach. The batch API, which works with large amounts of data on a daily, weekly, or monthly schedules. And especially this you can leverage for legacy systems like SAP or any Oracle with a big databases, where you would like to schedule these batch jobs at an business hours, where you could schedule that and then backfill with some last 1980 or 180 days of data which you can process, into your data cloud. And again, batch is always worked with asynchronously on an hourly cadence, which you're already aware of it from a Salesforce standard principles of patterns. We have patterns and anti-patterns always, right? So when it comes to implementation, so everyone has curious about how we can implement these. So we'd love to put some steps of implementations as well when it comes to design the ingestion of streaming and bulk ingestion. So if you start with how we can start implementation. So number one, you have to set up the Ingestion API connector inside Data Cloud. So sorry for that, because I don't have any Data Cloud org access now, because my 30 days period has been over and I've requested for one more 30 days. So ideally it's taking time to get my access, but this is what I have. So when I get an access, definitely I'm going to showcase once again in some other sessions. But when you visualize the things, how we can implement the steps. So when you're trying to set up the Ingestion API connector, so you have an option in the Salesforce Data Cloud admin, which is CDP admin. So you can add a new connector, and then you can upload a schema file, which is in a JSON format. And then you could retrieve tenant specific endpoints and object endpoints. You can available specific endpoints at CDP home. When you click on setup CDP home, you can see the specific tenant endpoint where you could grab that endpoints. So once you collect all this ABC setup kind of an elements, and what you have to do is you have to create and deploy your data streams for each object that you wish to deploy from your third party. Let's take an example. You have a JSON file which contains, and let's take an example of your one of your homegrown system you designed for collecting the customer payments. Okay. So when you're collecting a customer payments, ideally, what are all the attributes you're going to leverage for an input file is first name, last name, email, payment ID, payment date, payment status, who paid, and the address or any other information. So that is the fundamental principle of input file structure. So that structure where we're going to design as a JSON format, which is nothing but your schema file. That schema file you're going to ingest into Salesforce Data Cloud under connectors. Once you connect, then you can go to the data streams, click on new data stream, and then you can deploy that data stream, the one you created as a schema file. Once you've done it, the step number 3, we have to build a connected app. You have to build a connected app and the relevant scopes, because you have to authenticate any system with third-party system. You just need to provide some authentications for you to allow all accessing permissions. You have to implement auth flow to complete your authentications, or you could use any other OAuth 2.4 or any other named credentials kind of a schema, named credentials kind of an authentication pattern. After that, you could send calls with JWT barrier and the request header to object the endpoint URLs. So this is all the process which you have to follow from an implementation standpoint. And then you have to optionally leverage your any one of your API tools like REST Explorer, or you could leverage Postman to test your connections or test your API payloads, whether the data has been successfully transferring from a third party to Data Cloud under one of your data stream for each and every data object that what you're leveraging. So these are all the implementation steps from a streaming API perspective. So when it comes to in the streaming ingestion, so you have supported actions where it will insert the data, insert the records, and it will delete the records. The worst thing that what I understand is it can't update the data. So either it will insert the data or delete the records. So these are only 2 supported actions which is currently supported by streaming ingestion API. And as I said, the payload format is always JSON, and you will get a response status code with 202 with an indicate JWT barrier with verified and the valid data streams as well. So when you insert, you will get a response to a party with 202, whether the system accepted your data or not. So these are all a couple of implementation steps from a streaming ingestion perspective. When it comes to bulk, bulk works with a job kind of a nature. And what it does is a simple kind of a way. You should design a CSV file with field names, as I said, with the proper header row. You have to create a job. You have to create a job inside Data Cloud to start the ingestion workflow. And the third step is to upload the job data, complete CSV to process a single job. And you could close the job with uploads data for processing as well. So the endpoints, what are all the endpoints that what you had is, you could use get job info, about job, delete job. So these are all some of the endpoints which is readily available in bulk ingestion API. And you could use the same format CSV and you could process the same ingestion data records, or you could remove the data records as well. This also has two kind of methods or operations, one with data ingestion, another one is removing of a data records as well. So this bulk ingestion, as I said, which is really helpful for a team who want to work with the legacy systems, where you want to import a bulk amount of data from a third-party systems. And make sure you just need to perform these operations at the off-peak hours. Ideally should be night hours of your system. So there are very key points when you start doing a bulk ingestion. Number one, with your file must be an UTF-8 format. The data should not exceed 150 MB, which is nothing but your CSV file should not exceed 150 MB. And the CSV supported format would be RFC 4180, which is a critical structure that what standards which is given by a complete integration teams. And when you have when you're designing a file, the input file, so if you have any name spaces or empty field values, so it should be taken as a null. And each semantics, every patch semantics which is not supported, upsert records are not processed as a full replacement. So as I said, it only supports for now insert and deletions. And at the same time, your field name header should match the data source object field names, because when you're trying to do a bulk kind of a nature, so you always need to be focused on one simple principle, not only data cloud, everywhere. So when you're designing a system, your headers, your field name header should exactly matches with your data source object field names. Otherwise, it's completely cumbersome, and then it should be a layup job for us. So that's what the implementation steps for the bulk ingestion. But when it comes to synchronous validations, always some of the best practices what I recommended from an implementation standpoint is, so this is personally that what I was believe, especially on the synchronous validation, because batch runs on asynchronous validation, but your streaming runs on a synchronous validation. There are two things. There are 5 items which is mentioned, but 2 things which is really important. Number one is, anytime when you design a payload, so it should always have a flexibility in the functionality which you have to validate API payloads, which is synchronously and provides immediate feedback for any third-party developer. Because you have to build a file and then you have to give it to the third party, where they are the one who is going to ingest the data as per your file structure, as per your format that what you given, JSON format. Next part is, any payload failures comes, of course it comes, we can't say everything is success in our life, because there are some times where the payloads will fail. Every time you send failure reason to a team, to a third-party team, saying that what went wrong, on a proper validation report. You should store this failure somewhere in your system, because the system will provide a response. I would request to store somewhere in the integration logs, and then provide a scheduler report, and then send the report back to one of your internal integration teams to take a look about what went wrong. So that's most important thing. And then I won't recommend every payload should be log under one of your integration logs, which increase your data storage capacity and everything. So I would not request to persist the data. It should ignore the data, or it should not create the logs for those persisted data for especially failed payloads. So these 3 are most important from a synchronous validation perspective. When it comes to your authentication patterns, there are methods where the number one is schema file is important. Authentication is important. Endpoints are really important when you're trying to integrate with Ingestion API with the third-party systems. Schema file, which is nothing but your open API specification format, which is YAML file or YAML extension. You have to design an YAML file which contains your complete, YAML is nothing but just a format which you can look at the YAML with with YAML with the JSON structure as well. So it's not, once you design the file, you store that file with the schema file with YAML, the .yml or .yaml extension. And then the path should be there are things where you have to post is nothing but the third party will ingest the data into your data cloud, which is a post method, the post API. And if you look at the paths which have defined, the API connect name and the object name, which is always API connect name, which is object name. And if you want to delete is specific IDs, because when you insert the data into data cloud, it generates an ID. So you have to specifically define the IDs that you would love to delete the data of the one which you have mentioned, because when a third-party system integrator has been inserting data into your system, so the response which comes with the response codes along with the IDs. So it's always a good practice to send a response code along with the success IDs, so that it's easy for the person to delete those records with the IDs. All right. So the other special thing is an authentication. Always, I'm not saying that OAuth 2.0 is the best protocol, but there are times where it's completely depend upon your security patterns and the designs that what have been defined for your APIs. I figure out two things where I personally feel like OAuth 2.0 is one strongest protocol. Other one is like name and credentials. Either one is both good based on the integration pattern, what you would love to see. And for this Ingestion API, which you would love to connect with third party, I would prefer to go with OAuth 2.0 because it is very comfort and flexible to connect with third party. And then this is something that you're not, securing a complete file, which is coming with a different UTF-8 and with AML concept, which is very beneficial and which is very secure. So these are all some of the known things, required things when you design any or leveraging any ingestion API from a streaming or a batch perspective. When it comes to the payloads and limits, the supported field types when you design your schema file would be integer, strings, numbers, and booleans. That's it. And from a data format perspective, it always starts with ISO Zulu with format UDC. And the required size limit of file is 200 KB per single request. On a streaming pattern, for a bulk, it's 150 MB. So on the maximum payload size, which on one single call would be 200 KB per single. From a streaming API pattern, from a bulk, it's 150 MB per job per file. So retry logic always recommended because when you work with any other systems of integrations, there are some things where you have to fail. And when you work with the enterprise systems like TIBCO or any other platforms or Mule, they have a flexibility or a functionality where if something failure in the synchronous process, they always have a flexibility to go back and then retrieve that record 5 times for the next 50 minutes or 30 minutes. And still it's failing, they're going to put that record into a deadlock. After one day, they'll again transfer that record to try again, right? So this is the kind of a pattern when we're trying to work with a retry logic. If you're going to work with this kind of logic in our typical ways, I would feel like a good integration systems you're going to build it. As not only this data cloud, but for any system, if you're trying to build a retry logic, it's always good for your integration best practices. So nested objects which are not supported, the relations and all this stuff. And these are all some of the factors which have to take care when it comes to the payloads and limits. The most important, the responses. So I am a developer who want to leverage out of the box response codes rather than building my own custom codes. Some people will build custom response codes in the custom settings, and then they're trying to, send the responses back to third-party systems. But I always follow some standard responses, which is given by the internet standard framework, which is 202, 204, 400, 401, 400, 404, 402, 429. So these are all some of the responses which is given by any API integration pattern. So I would really follow this kind of responses rather than going with third-party customer responses. So these are all some of the things which I would really wanted you learn from a development perspective when there is a scenario where you should really start to work with streaming API, or when you're trying to there's a question comes from your customer saying that hey Fanny, I would love to ingest the data into data cloud. I would love to automate this because one time it's okay. You could process the records with maybe you could, because now it supports metadata API. So there are some data streams. So there are some objects which supports metadata API where we could leverage and then ingest data through data cloud, data loader, sorry. So there are some times where you can't able to, process the same every day, right? And, somebody has to work day and night to process these records through data loader. But we are in a, almost 20th generation, which we are going to automate everything in this ChatGPT real world. Everyone want an automate kind of a thing. So when customer asks you, is there a way that you could, ingest the data into data cloud from a legacy systems? Or I would love to send the data to Oracle or any other systems with an APIs, then I think blindly can go and then leverage ingestion API. based on the business requirement or the use case. Either you start with streaming or you can start with bulk. So these are all the methods where you can strictly, leverage your data cloud from an API ingestion perspective. So this is one of the topic in our agenda. So let's go back to our next topic, which is Connect API. So this is an API that what I would love to talk about. So this is the one ingestion API where we discussed. So let's talk about Connect API. So you should understand what is a Connect API, right? So I'm not sure how many of them really know what is Connect API, because Connect API is, which is again, it's a kind of REST API. But I would love to understand how many of them really know what is a Connect API, where you could leverage Connect API. Connect REST API, it is also kind of a REST API, which you could leverage for many things. This is one of the best API that what I've ever seen so far. When I really wanted to integrate with my mobile apps, where I want to build a mobile app. So in my past, I've used REST API, the normal REST API, not a Connect API. I use REST API that are connecting with the mobile app for any authentication. And simply I'm going to build our get method, post, put, patch, and all delete methods when you're trying to retrieve or get the records from a mobile app. And it not only does a mobile app, you can build a mobile app, you could integrate third-party web applications with Salesforce, and it can notify a group of users with an events about, because this is what I'm saying, so if you trying to integrate any third-party web applications, and then if someone you want to notify within your group, so this REST API can help you out. And then there's some other things where it display feed of an external systems like an intranet or any other thing. So, and then you could design some games with the feed notifications. You can create some custom branded skin for charter and everything. So there are plenty of things you could leverage in Connect REST API. Apart from Connect REST API, it does the best out of what Data Cloud. It supports Data Cloud with the variety of features. So if you look at the variety of features that what it does actually. So if you look at the Connect REST API, so it has Data Cloud functionality. You can look at the Data Cloud resources. So with the Connect API, you have an option that you could get the metadata, add a query data, create data, update, run and delete all these insights, calculated insights, and then whatnot. It does plenty of things. It supports your metadata, it supports your profile library, because it just simply supports your Apex. If it supports Apex means you can use all these methods. You could use all this profile library, the metadata, your data models, your query library. You can query directly the Data Cloud objects and then get the relevant model data. You could query calculated insights library to get the calculated insights. So simply you could leverage this API. If you want to query this, or if you want to query this libraries or leveraging these methods, essentially you required your Connect API. Without Connect API, you can't able to connect with your Data Cloud object models or Data Cloud, all these segmentation features and everything. So you can't able to connect any of the data from a Data Cloud without Connect API. So let's talk about where Connect API can exactly leveraging inside Data Cloud, right? So just remember this article. So this is very, very helpful. So if you are a techie, and I would request to go and then see the kind of information that what Data Cloud can provide from a object explorer perspective, and the profile libraries, metadata, and everything. So let's go back to our presentation, and then we'll talk about more. Yeah, let's talk about how many of them know about the flows of an Einstein Automate, which is we're calling now as the Flowonetics. Now Data Cloud supporting flows and Data Cloud actions, Data Cloud objects like your data streams, your data model, your segmentations, your calculated insights, and everything is supported by Flow, because this completely sitting under your Salesforce platform, because this is a platform kind of feature where all your flows has been designed in platform where you can go and then access. So within the flow, you have an option where Data Cloud supports some of the actions of Data Cloud features like calculated insights, your data model objects, your DMOs, your DLOs, your segmentations. So all those high fancy elements which you could support inside flows, where you can go and then design some customer magic altogether, which we can talk in a separate model. But when it comes to authentication. So there is always one thing, you always feels, right? So there are, there are two kind of things. So I always talks about data cloud. You could always purchase the data cloud org. I can explain a better way so that you'll understand more from a strategy perspective, right? So you have your sales cloud or service cloud. Just imagine this is what you purchased when you want to start a business. So you purchased a sales service cloud, and then you have started your implementations on the sales for your lead nurturing and all this stuff. And then you build a service cloud for your customer experience, providing a customer service, customer experience to the customers. So after this, then you have a plenty of systems. Like, let's take an example. You have a B2C commerce cloud. You purchase B2C commerce cloud for managing your e-commerce. And later point of time, you purchase your loyalty cloud to manage your loyal customers and managing your brand promotions and everything. After some point of time, so where your brand, your company has been increasing, and then you're going to start with your own portal. So you build your experience cloud portals, you build your B2B commerce sometimes, and then for your own internal business partners. So you have this many kind of things, right? So now when it comes to connecting all the dots, so you have the customer data sits here, you have customer data sits here, so you have profile data sits here, so you have your customer data sits here. So you want to bring the data and then design some unification to personalize the customer experience throughout a holistic way. Now the big whole picture will come to the data cloud. So now we're going to purchase a data cloud, a big picture. This is going to serve my system where I'm going to connect all the systems. But I'm going to connect all the systems, and then I'm going to unify the data, and this data where I'm going to leverage it for my marketing cloud, for increasing my marketing personalization. I would love to use this data for, I want to build a customer 360, a unified individual ID, which contains a proper first name, last name, email ID, mobile number, phone number, or I can use my address. So I'm going to design one individual ID. So I'm going to send this data to SFMC to target customers with a whole new way using a different social channel. So this is what the data cloud, when people were really talking about. But when it looks from a system or strategy perspective, this is all fine. But the question from the development standpoint, these are all the systems which are not connected together, because from here to here, these are all good. But some sort of a stage where one of my CTO is really keen to, because this I don't have much access, and my most of the sales sitting in my sales cloud, my service team sitting in service cloud, and my B2C commerce cloud team sitting on B2C commerce cloud, loyalty cloud team sitting in loyalty cloud. So we really don't have an access of data cloud. But we would love to see from a sales cloud perspective, we would love to build one Lightning Web component to design a complete customer 360 kind of a record, where we would love to see a complete actionable insights, what's happening, what kind of a data, what's the real time data that we would wanted to see it from a person who's sitting on sales cloud, service cloud. They want to see complete customer 360 of a person, want to see the actionable insights. They want to see some real-time, data, real-time analytics, real-time events, actions, and everything inside Sales Cloud. So that the requirement is where they could close the deals. They closely look watching the customer on real time, and then they can crack the deals. They can sell the customers with their more products. They could increase their ACV. They increase their loyalty and all this stuff, right? But how? From a system which is sitting here doing all this, all the interactions have been sitting here, and from a sales service load, people who are sitting here, there is no direct connections. When you wanted to build some great stuff, you wanted to build a great platform, how you wanted to do it, I would love to access my CDP features, my CDP data model inside Sales Cloud, Service Cloud. That's where your complete Connect API will come into the picture. And now you would understand how you could connect a platform sitting Sales Service Cloud to a CDP, and then how you could bring the data from Data Cloud of all their segmentations, the data calculated insights, or you could just capture whatever the data what you want from Data Cloud. And you could build a good Lightning Web components. You could build such components. You could build your complete actionable insights, real-time data events, streamings, and everything. So let's see how this is going to be, designed inside Data Cloud using Connect API, right? I think there are some questions. Let me see if any questions. Missing the diagram. Data Cloud comes before design unique ID. I didn't understand, Lakshmi. So this is what we have. So is there anything that I've did a mistake? Data Cloud is a prior part of SFMC in order to provide unified ID. That's what we did, right? So we design a unified ID here, and then we're going to send the ID to SFMC. Can you talk a bit? All right. So now we can talk about how we can, pull the data from a Data Cloud and then build some actionable insights inside Sales Service Cloud teams. So how it does is we have a Connect API, which can does and how you can connect and bring the data from your Data Cloud, back to your Sales Service Cloud. So the number one step is, as I said, any system. So there are different patterns where you leverage your authentication patterns of OAuth 2.0, or you can go with your name and credentials. So number one step that what I would love to do is I'm going to perform a call out through my Apex. I'm going to design an Apex. First of all, I would love to build one LWC component to bring the customer 360 audiences from a Data Cloud, which is nothing but the complete unified data of a person from a Data Cloud to my Service Cloud. So I'm going to build a call out. The call out which contains my name and credentials, which contains my endpoint. So once I perform a call out, so I would love to ingest my name and credentials. After that, I would love to start with my authentication provider. So once my auth has been given my token, so automatically I'm going to connect all this information to the Data Cloud connected app. This connected app will give me authentication saying that access granted for accessing certain objects in Data Cloud. And then you could access the data from a Data Cloud back to your Service Cloud, and then you could build your Lightning Web components and then display the data of the customer 360 or an actionable insights to one of your customer 360. So this is how the core authentication steps work, especially using this. Everything can be done through Connect API, because when I'm talking about Connect API is when I'm trying to connect with Apex, especially connect in Apex, you have to follow some of the namespaces on the Connect API in the CDP query method usage. One within Apex, I'm going to write a method which comes with the Connect API.cdp query the respective whatever the method it is. Because what it does is the CDP home is the one which provides the provision to access the CRM instance. And after that, my Apex uses the call out to connect with the auth provider to perform or create a one session, the current session. The session will go through to the Data Cloud and then get the data from a Data Cloud, and then it will display the data into one of your Lightning Web component. Maybe you can build one LWC component and you can use Apex as a backend, which you could build all the data. When it comes to Connect API feature, the Connect API will only work when connected to CDP in the same instance. If you look at right, so this is the logic that what they're talking about. So the Connect API will only work when connecting to CDP in the same instance. So you have to access, because you have to provision your Data Cloud within the same instance of Service Cloud, then your Connect API will work. But when it coming to a different instance, if you look at a different instance, so you can leverage a direct call out with the name and credentials. But here you're leveraging the name and credentials as an OAuth provider. But here you're not leveraging any name and credentials. You can just simply performing an Apex call out and then get the data from a Data Cloud using a Connect API. So that's the differences between both using Connect API versus leveraging your name and credentials. So if you look at Connect API, the connected app, what are all the connected app things that what you have to do is, so if you look at the callback URL that what we're designing, the CDP or that what you have, this is what the callback URL you have to perform when you're trying to use a connected app. So when it comes to your authentication provider, so the callback URL should always have the CDP Connect API, because it's so important. The callback URL is so important. It must be added to your connected app which calls back from your name and credentials to work properly when you're connecting with your data cloud to, the different Salesforce org. At the same time, the name and credentials, where it has the authentication making simple, you just design one time, so you can leverage the name and credentials throughout the time, which include the protocols, which includes your provider, which includes your authentication flow. So this is one time. Once you design it, so that's it. So you could leverage all the time with this name and credentials, because it makes your life easier when you're trying to integrate with third party, because authentication is very simple in name and credentials. See, other area where you could always manage your credentials, your Connect API credentials and custom metadata types as well. Maybe you could try with this kind of an approach as well. Because what it does is, to some people will hard code the respective credentials directly inside the code in Apex. So I would always prefer to have a kind of custom metadata type, manage all the custom metadata types in CDP Connect API, and then create some of the standard fields, and then just try to, manage the authentication values inside metadata type. And then when you're trying to perform a call out, just try to call the metadata rather than, hard coding everything. So these are all some of the authentication patterns, but when it comes to the call out, so these call outs is simply, completely instant agnostic, because the endpoint is contained in the name and credentials. So the simple method, the simple programmatic method that what we've been defined, it just perform a new request to set the endpoint and then perform the method of get and get the response, and then you can store the response back to one of your integration logs as well. This is a direct call out from set endpoint using a name and credentials. But when it comes to the custom metadata, so this is the patterns where you have to leverage. Either one, you can leverage for callouts, either name and credentials, or you could manage everything into custom metadata, but don't hard code directly in your Apex. So when it comes to overall things to keep in mind, when you're consuming data cloud in core, it means like when you're consuming data from a data cloud, it's always a pull model. It's not a push. It's always a pull model, because you have to pull the data from a data cloud and then you have to display. You have to perform some sort of a button kind of an operation. You click on a button, it will call the method, and the method will go to data cloud and then bring the data from a respective sources and then display it. So you could leverage your Lightning component in the front-end interface. You could leverage your standard versus custom component. Just think through before we design anything. When it comes to API, so make sure when you're trying to perform any API calls, the API limits will be consumed when you're trying to call with any of the API. Be mindful of the limits and restrictions, and the number of volume as well. Keep in mind that you have to take care of the volume and the concurrency limits as well. So these are all some of the APIs which, especially on the Connect API, where you leverage when you're trying to access the data from one service cloud org to another data cloud org, or you purchase data cloud org within your Salesforce service cloud org. So there are two kind of things where I would recommend when you design your strategy kind of a thing. So the one thing is, I'm going to put this. The one thing is, there's a big whole picture about your two clouds are sitting on the same thing. Number one is you already purchase your sales cloud, and then you would love to purchase your data cloud, and then you can host the data cloud within the same org where the sales cloud has been provisioned. So there are other systems where with the restrictions, security, compliance policies, and also what people does is they can purchase sales cloud in a separate org, and then because they already have a sales cloud from the longer term, so now they would love to purchase data cloud as a separate. So in this region, so the two things what you're going to connect is from here to here, you could just directly leverage your Connect API, and then bring the data from a data cloud to sales cloud. This is just a pull method, nothing push, just a pull. So from here to here, all the same concept, but here you should work with the either name and credentials, or you can pitch with OAuth 2.2 kind of perform. So this is the only difference that what you're making it. So the rest all it's just a common. So that's the benefit of Connect API versus the name and credentials, right? So both the scenarios, it's a pull method only. So it's not a push. So when it comes to what are all the, when you're trying to connect the API and then when you're trying to design Apex, right? So when you're trying to build an Apex, so the methods what supports from here, you look at what are all the methods. These are all the methods where you could retrieve the data from data models. You could get the data from your query supports batch queries and it supports calculated insights. You could get the metadata from a calculated insight object, and you could query the calculated insight, get records, update, and you can delete the records as well. And as I said, the lookup ID, universal ID lookups, where you want to get the unified ID profiles of any source ID. So you could get the data as well, and you could get the segmentations data as well. And if you want to perform some identity resolution rule set data, you could just, retrieve the data from different kind of tables of data cloud as well. And then you could just design your beautiful LWC interface to show your sales service streams to make it more bigger. Yeah. So that's how this connect API versus your name and credentials works in data cloud. This is how you can access the data cloud objects within your sales cloud or service cloud or a loyalty cloud. Right? Any questions, team, so far? Any questions? All right, I think let's move on to our next topic, which is web interactions. So when it comes to web interactions for data cloud, so if you're already aware of it, so in data cloud documentation, so I'm going to talk about our data cloud. I'm going to talk and open about a data cloud documentation. So if we look at the developer documentation of data cloud, so when it comes to web interactions, so you should always focus, when you connect data. So there is a concept of capture web interactions here. Just click on this capture web interactions. So this web interactions will help you out. This is an SDK. So what the Salesforce interaction SDK does is, so this interaction SDK captures, collects, and track data from your web interactions, and it sends the information to data cloud. So what it does is, this all information can be used to, you can compile behavior profiles of your website visitors, segment audiences, and build integrations. So for example, the Salesforce interaction SDK has pre-built integration type called cart interactions, right? So with the cart interactions, and you have cart interactions, catalog interactions, and order interactions. So these are all some of the things where you perform in websites, right? So within e-commerce websites. So let's talk about one of the interaction type, so which is a cart interaction. So when you're trying to perform a cart interaction, so when cart interaction occurs, when the customer modifies the online shopping cart on a website, let's take an example. If I'm a person where I'm trying to modify one of the shopping cart on website, so let's imagine that you create an e-commerce website built on your own infrastructure and platform outside of Salesforce product or a solution. On the site where you have several products listed on the customer, what the customers does is the customers can view and buy it. So what are all the type of interaction that your customers might do on the site that you want to be captured and sent to data cloud. So what you does is, there are some items where you can go and then you like the respective product and then you can place them to the shopping cart, or you can put them through an order. You see it, right? So there are two interactions that have been captured. One with there are two interactions that have been captured. The one with the capturing your order data when the customer is adding and removing items from a cart, and that data you're sending it to data cloud. One with add to cart interaction, the other one which capturing the single line item being added to a cart on your website. So there's one more interaction. So there are two interactions which is happening. So those two interactions ideally, where you can go and then perform a simple interaction type, which is a send event API call. So this send event API call, which you can capture interactions and collect associate data from the website customers. So if you look at this simple example, so some of the a person of funny went on website, he as the person went or view catalog object. So this interaction contains your product ID and all these attributes. So all this information which you can capture, and then we could try to ingest the data into data cloud. So this is one of the SDK where it's available, where you can leverage this SDK, and then you could just design all your event data models to to feed the data from your websites into your data cloud. And there are other things available, especially on if you want to capture one of your consent management, because not all website visitors and customers provides the consent, right? And then if someone provides it, then you could capture through consent tracking. So if you want to support the consent management, so Salesforce SDK is specially designed to send events if the customer has consent to tracking. So when the consent is revoked, or when the consent is revoked, or when the consent is given by the customer, So what Web SDK does is it'll capture all the events, and then it'll provide the purpose of a consent, the status of the consent, and all these consent configurations can be through a consent API in Salesforce Interaction SDK, because the Salesforce Interaction SDK supports a different kind of an APIs. One with your event API, the send event API calls, and the other one with your the consent API, which supports your complete configurations. And the other things are sitemaps also. The sitemaps also, which can be provided by Interactions SDK, which is a configurable driven integration layer that executes the complete layer and which is deployed on Web SDK. It's very simple, which you could design that Web SDK that maps all your objectives to design complete stuff. So what I would recommend is, I would recommend to, look at your Data Cloud Web SDK, and you could see to download the SDK complete version and then start, spin up one of your Visual Studio and then try to grab all these SDK elements and then design this SDK to connect with Data Cloud. As again, when you connect with Data Cloud again, so it has a simple schema file which you have to define, and then ingest the schema file into Data Cloud to feed the interactions into Data Cloud from our websites. So this is how the Web SDK of Data Cloud supports. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Do you know if the segments can be pushed to AWS S3 bucket? Lavanya, yes. So this is the kind of a topic that I would love to talk about in the next slide, especially when you're working with Apex, when you're especially working with your AWS S3 kind of locations. We have a capacity which you could send the AWS, we could send the segments back to AWS S3 as well. I'm going to talk about in the next slides. How is a web interactions in CDP different from IIS browser behavior? It's a good question, Krishna. The same behavior, Krishna, is nothing much, because that's what I've said. So the same interactions in SCDP, in Interaction Studio, where we have where we can leverage a beacon to inject the Web SDK to one of our the main JavaScript file, and then either sitemap JS files and all. So it automatically captures the interactions into Interaction Studio. So the same thing as I've said. So in Interactions SDK as well, we have our sitemap configuration integration layer has been designed. You can just design those layer on top of your Web SDK that provides all the data as well. Because there are two things. Either you can go with that kind of a route. There are two kind of routes, Krishna. So the one route would be, so if you have a Data Cloud, so you could leverage your Web SDK, to bring all the interactions, back to Data Cloud. So if someone won't have a B2C Commerce Cloud, you have a we have an Interaction Studio platform. So this Interaction Studio platform, where you have a website, where you capture all the interactions, to IIS platform. So Data Cloud has a connected to IIS, where you could feed all the interactions to Data Cloud as well. So here, the only thing what we are eliminating is, so if a customer has an IIS, if the customer don't have an IIS, if I'm a customer don't have an IIS platforms, I would prefer to go with Web SDK route, right? If I have an IIS, and I preferably go to IIS route. Why should I spend on my other full stack developers to work on Web SDKs? I hope you got your answer. Yep. Any other questions? I think, Lavanya, I'll definitely come to your point in the next slides. Siva, any questions from your side? The same interactions as nothing. Do you have any link that shows some examples? Sorry, Siva, I don't have any links to show some examples how it works, but a functionality wise, what it does is, as I've told here, the interactions would be the same. I'm not seeing any difference, especially. The only difference would be with or without Interaction Studio customers. So the customer has an IIS, the person can go and then feed the data into Data Cloud. If there is no IIS, they could preferably go with the Web SDK. But Web SDK supports 2-3 APIs, one with consent API, sent event APIs, and your sitemap as well. Thank you. So let's go to our next slide, especially on The other one, engagement mobile software development kit. So this is one more SDK, which we're calling as mobile app integration for CDP. So this API, where you could get this API, especially on the same concept inside your data cloud resources. So you have your connect data option. So here you can see integrate your mobile applications. So this integrate mobile applications, where this is one more SDK, which is nothing but your engagement mobile software development kit, which is ESDK. What it does, it will enable the collection of data about the customer mobile app, all the interactions about the customer mobile app through event tracking, such as adding or removing from a cart or on the iOS and Android platform, especially the same thing. The one which we're discussing initially was a web platform. So this is now the mobile platform. So it also collected the same interactions, and then it can send the data to your data cloud. There are two kind of event types, especially in this SDK. So the one with structured and unstructured event types, because the structured events have strict requirements for the types of information that can be provided, but they also comes predefined with the suggested mobile connector schema for data cloud, and also that can be extended to capture extra data as well. So some examples of what I heard about this. So from a structured event in order to capture interactions. So let's imagine that you have a customer that are visiting your e-commerce store from a mobile device, and you want to capture the data and have it sent to data cloud to further build out the customer unified view. So on the mobile device, they are able to complete purchases, and they are able to complete the browsing and all the stuff. So what it does is you can go on and capture the information of their orders and purchases. And this information you could see under one of your the sample schema that I won't have, but the same kind of a schema. What it does is it'll just capture the interactions of your purchase, your order details, your total value of an amount, your line item details, your catalog object types, your quantity, price, attributes. So it does complete stuff from a structural perspective. So when it comes to your unstructured events, so it has no the unstructured events have no requirements. What it does is the unstructured events will allow some flexibility to capture some data that falls into some of the use cases that are outside of your use case for structured events. When you talk about your custom event definitions, right? So imagine that your e-commerce site has many people who was doing all abandoned cards or not checking out, and you want to capture that information so that you could follow up with an email or text message, or even you can put those customers into a journey in Marketing Cloud, right? So in this case, where you can create your own custom event to capture cart abandonments and have data sent to data cloud so that you could act on it, and you could encourage your customers to reconsider finishing their purchases. So the same event, what it does is in the SDK, if you look at you could use this GitHub repositories where you can connect with the mobile SDK. So what it does is it has one simple cart element where, you could design your custom event within the custom event, where you could define your names of cart abandonment, and then you could define what is the attribute of SKU attribute, what is a cart item, cart price, when the customer has been, abandoned. You can capture the time as well. So all those things where you can be able to grab directly into your data cloud, and then you could design your complete structure and unstructured events from a mobile interface as well, either Android or iOS. So this is how your web application especially works with data cloud. So these are all some of the examples that I would love to talk about from a website and mobile perspective. But when it comes to the question which I think is a person, I think Lavanya asked me a question where can we be able to get the segmentized data that can be pushed back to AWS S3 bucket, or any business use cases where they can view, or any way the business users can view the records in a segment visually in AWS, especially talking about, right? So when you're talking about data ingestion, right, the one question which you're talking about, the data ingestion using your APIs, there are ways that what we discussed currently in data cloud. So the one with ingestion API, the ingestion API is the one that I would deliberately wanted to talk today. So there is another way which you could configure, Lavanya, which is the Amazon S3 connector. So what you can do is this Amazon S3 connector, what it does is, so from my perspective, from my own knowledge, it will schedule the Amazon S3 connector will configure, and then once you configure it, it could schedule and retrieval in order to pull records from S3 first of all. But the ingestion API is a RESTful API that works with two interaction patterns, one with bulk and streaming, which you already talked about it. Either way, you could be able to access the data from S3, but when it comes to send calculated insights or a segmentized data back to your S3 location is the only one way. I would prefer to have a route directly from a data cloud. I don't think so any kind of an option. But what I would recommend is first you could get the data into your sales or service cloud. From there, you could be able to send the data back to your S3 location. So that's a simple integration options. There are two ways because currently your data cloud supports this kind of an option. So your data cloud supports the respective Apex methods. These Apex methods where I would prefer to bring data of your segments. And once you bring the data of your segments, I would prefer you already have a great integration with an AWS S3. So what you can do is you could directly integrate your through an Apex call out again to bring the data back to your AWS S3 location. So this is a preferable option rather than going with the direct. I think there's no other option apart from this option.
Oh, hi. So there is no direct option from data cloud to AWS. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think this is the best option where because the route already been established. I think I would prefer to have this route from an Apex from a Salesforce to AWS S3.
Right. No, they can also look at the segments in Sales Cloud instead, but I thought there would be an option from data cloud to S3.
Yeah. There is an option where if someone asks you, there's plenty of data sitting in AWS S3, how you can retrieve and push the data into data cloud, then you could leverage any streaming API or a batch API. But for sending data from data cloud to AWS, I don't think so it's possible. So this is the only route.
Right. Okay, cool. Thanks, Fanny.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's how the two things which you're talking about. So there are other things as mobile app integration, which we covered, how it can be done. So these are all SDKs which are supported. I would recommend to go and then leverage these SDKs and then you could just design. Yes, Shiva, go ahead.
Sorry, a quick question.
Yes, please.
When you were saying data cloud to S3 is not allowed?
Currently, data cloud to S3, is not allowed because only S3 to data cloud, we have a connector that we can design, pull the data into data cloud.
Okay, I could be wrong, but I have seen an activation target as S3. It actually pushes in two set of files. One is the actual JSON file and the other something to do with the metadata. I'm not quite sure, but we can both check on that.
The activation targets, Yeah, activation targets, one supports your package of one with B2C Commerce Cloud, the other one with AWS.
Only for the activation targets, I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, probably I'll check that out.
I remember it was quite a long time back, but we both can check on that.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, all right, I'll check that out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So let's go back to our next topic. Would be around so let's talk about accessing my Apex. So these are all some of the screenshots that I've captured from the website, which is how we can access data cloud via an Apex. The data platform that sits behind data cloud can be query SQL, the one which I've told about. There is one thing where we have already talked about it, how to connect and then get the data from a data cloud using a simple SQL. As I've told, it's always a push. It's always a pull kind of a data. So if you look at your method that what we have been designed, the connect API and the query that what you have been designed, because the methods which has already been available, the queries which has been supported, you could construct the query with this SS40 because this is the sources. You could just construct the queries and then you could retrieve the data from all different methods of your CIs, calculated insights, your lookup segmentations, and your identity resolution rule set as well. So with an Apex, you could be accessed data cloud, all data cloud model which starts with SS40 as the naming conventions. We can retrieve the data from a data cloud, and then you could design holistic way of your patterns. You could design your front-end interfaces using LWC or VF, and then you could showcase to your internal teams as well. That's with an Apex. So the other one with calculated insights. So we could query the data using simple SQL. So if you look at the calculated insights, We can go to the calculated insights and you can design an insight, and within the insight where you can go and then write a query, and then you could perform the complete calculated insights. You could perform your metrics, engagement scores, and you can define your clicks messages. And you could design your connected e-commerce website metrics as well. You could define and build your loyalty score, loyalty points, and you could design your CSP, the CLV score of your customers. The most weird product categories, browsing behavior, product purchase behavior. So the holistic way of calculated insights you can build using data queries. So you can use simple SQL query language, which you could define, and then you can make it countable as well. So these are all some of the development scope when it comes to Data Cloud. And when it comes to a couple of other areas where I would love to talk about is, I think we covered most of the API stuff and the development scope. So let's find out the final closing words. So when it comes to development, these are all some of the features which are available in Data Cloud. Always, I would recommend you should understand some of the APIs, connectors, and SDKs that are available for you to use custom development. And of course, there are some curious people who want to know more, and we'll definitely deep dive into some of the insights in the next coming sessions. So if you have any Data Cloud knowledge where you would love to extend your knowledge with our teams or our communities, you probably could just give a message so that we will definitely going to discuss and talk about it as well. Yeah, that's it for today's session. There are some resources where you can go and then find out. I'm going to share this details with you. I'm going to share this presentation as well. If anyone has any questions, you could just ask me, so that I'll happy to clarify it. I'm going to share this presentation as well because it has all the links where you can go and then grab it as well. Any questions, one? Thank you, Shiva. So I think there's one. I think I may miss this point to Lavanya. I think whatever Shiva said is true, because I currently don't have a Data Cloud app, but I think I'm the one who explained that. Maybe I forgot it as well. I'm the one who explained that design the complete deployment or packaging and deployment kind of a topic, where we seen to deploy the entire stuff as a package, and then we could deploy it to different locations. Maybe it supports AWS S3, but we'll take a look and then we'll come back again. Probably I'll message you. You can message me LinkedIn, or I'll check it out.
Cool. Thank you so much, Funny. It was a nice session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll come up with some more. So I think this session we are closing Data Cloud topics, and I think there is. I'm going to share it with you, the series of Data Cloud where we talked about it, all the sessions. If you're already aware of it, that's okay. But I'm going to share it, the Data Cloud series, the respective playlist that what we have. So if anyone wanted to see all the series, they probably can share it with us as well. I can share it with everyone so that they'll also aware and they will also learn something. So we'll also learn something. So because there's a quite beta kind of a product where every company has been testing out. So we're also working towards to build something good on this, especially on packaging and all the stuff. If any questions, I think let's feel free to share it with us so that we can also learn, and you can also learn the same thing.
Cool. Sounds good.
Sounds good. So thanks everyone. So Lakshmi, any questions you have? So this is our last session for Data Cloud, and thank you for all for joining with us and then make this event so successful. Thank you again.